This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to Western folks and associates and colleagues across the region. This is today's GRC Connect Middle East. Thank you for everyone for joining today. We've got a great panel for you ahead of the session. We're going to be talking about cloud GRC holistic strategy and not just tools. That's going to be taken on by our expert panelists today. My name is Peter Wilson, and I'm the client executive here at OneTrust. And I look after the Middle Eastern region for our clients. I've been working with OneTrust now for over 4 years. My background is predominantly within privacy, but also look after a team of specialists, which include GRC as well. And we work with the likes of Ahmed and his organization, working with partners across the region. So it's a pleasure to be able to introduce today's event as well. Please do note that our audience, unfortunately, you're unable to unmute yourselves, but please do engage with us over the chat and send us any questions that you may have today on the event. Before we move on to the main event, just wanted to have a quick poll as well, which we'd like you to answer to help us kind of fund these events as well, really, and obviously perk interest from our audience. So part of the mission is to really make these GRC Connect events for free as well. We encourage you to tell us what it is that we can help you with, as well as provide you with further resources as well as part of these events. So please check as many as you like within the poll that we're going to be introducing you to. You can also request to speak to one of our team members to address any specific needs by selecting the last option on here as well. So if we kick off with the poll. So the first one is, which describes you best? There's obviously multiple choice questions here. So manage security risk internally, focus on internal third-party risk management, I do it all, and anything other than the above. And then we have question 2, are you looking to automate processes in your GRC program? I'll let you go through the answers there yourselves for question number 2. And then the third question here is, would you like a complimentary copy of your trust toolkit? Yes, and then you can please consent to one of our team to follow up with yourselves, or no thank you. So please answer those questions for us, and that'll be very valuable for our future purposes. So in a moment, I wanted to pass you on to our chapter chair, Ahmed, who will begin the discussion with us today. So just a little bit about Ahmed himself. So he is a director within Megdam Technology. We've been working with him for a couple of years now, and he's the regular chapter chair for GRC Connect as well. So we're delighted to have him on and discussing and delivering this Middle Eastern chapter chair meeting. We're also grateful to all of our chapter chairs across these local events as well. But he'll be helping to deliver the content that is relevant to you today, and he's put together a great session and a great line of panelists as well. So very much appreciative of you for doing that, Ahmed. If you do have any questions for future chapter chair meetings, and chapter chair does want to hear about them, please do send your ideas across through our questions box as well, and or we get in touch via LinkedIn page as well, so we can circulate that to you here, and also we can circulate it to the end of the session. So please feel free to join future sessions as well, and obviously join the community that we have set up. So very interactive for you. So before we start our panel, don't forget to make your registration on our 2022 Trust Week events as well, which is coming up. I believe the next session that we have coming up is in May in Atlanta. Obviously, not all of us can make that event, so we have a virtual event in June as well. So that consists of expert panelists, future privacy tech roadmaps, networking certifications, partner expo, you name it, we've got it there. So please feel free to use that code at the bottom there for for any tickets to those events. Strongly recommend attending those events to give you the latest and greatest in the world of privacy, data governance, GRC, and security as well. Finally, just wanted to wrap up and say stay up to date on what's happening with these chapter chair meetings as well, in terms of connecting to the communities, and also obviously from the link on the LinkedIn page as well. So I think that's pretty much it from starting off perspective. Wanted to hand you over to Ahmed, who is our chapter chair, and he can introduce the panelists today and then kick off the session. Over to you, Ahmed. Ahmed, can't hear you at the moment.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, whoever listening to me, and the participants, and especially a warm welcome to the guests here. My name is Ahmed. I'm a senior cybersecurity strategist by profession, and I lead the cybersecurity business for McDonald Technology based out in Qatar at the moment. And I feel privileged when I'm been allowed to contribute my knowledge and experience in such knowledge communities such as GRC Connect. And from past couple of years, since when I'm trying to contribute the experience and knowledge in several communities, GRC Connect is one of the very unique community which has been led by the One Trust and the top-notch professionals like Peter Wilson and Ian Evans as well. So today, we have selected a very relevant and hot topic for the discussion. So which is part of our practice from past almost a year. We have been selecting all of the topics which have been proven to be the need of the time in terms of driving the digital transformation journey and initiatives as part of the Middle Eastern region. There are a lot of regulations which have been introduced. There were a lot of new standards came up country-wise. So today we will be talking about the cloud GRC, not cloud migration, not only the tools, because cloud generally has been considered only as a technology, and most of the technological aspects has been discussed, but not the GRC or the process behind. So before we get into the deep dive discussions, I would like to introduce my respected panelists. I would like to request Sherbil, if you kindly would like to introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Ahmed. So my name is Sherbil Nasrallah. I'm the commercial manager at Code Technologies. Code is based in the Middle East. We have offices in Lebanon and in Dubai. We are specialized in cloud migrations, cloud management platforms. So we are Microsoft, Google, and different vendors partner. Previously, I worked for Microsoft in a regional function covering different countries in North Africa and the Middle East. And we've been driving with our partners all the cloud migration, the digital transformation the whole technology world is experiencing. And hopefully we can share some insights, some lessons we've learned through these engagement and share some knowledge with the community.
Thank you, Sherbil. Very warm welcome to you on the panel. And the panel has been shared by Salimullah Khan as well. Very warm welcome to you. Salim, would you kindly introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Ahmed. And my name is Salim. I'm based in Kuwait, working for automotive sector right now, but I have background in consultancy with infrastructure as well as cloud. And currently, being part of Kuwait Automotive, we have presence in UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. So Kuwait Automotive is part of Al Shaya Group, which is very well known in the region, with a presence of more than 27 countries, with a huge presence in retail in different sectors. We will definitely share some lessons learned over the past experiences and current experiences. Looking forward. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed.
Thank you, Salim. So without any further ado, I will now we'll start our discussion about the topic. So as we all know, these days, in particularly the Middle Eastern region is striving towards the better, the technological standards and to achieve a more effective kind of governance framework implementations. With this effort, like the organizations are experiencing the journey for digital transformation. Cyber is moving in multiple dimensions across multiple disciplines, and more importantly, the cloud. Therefore, the organizations should consider developing a strategy as a foundational element in the direction and leverage cloud GRC capabilities to drive a more agile and efficient risk and compliance management programs around. A good cyber GRC program is fundamentally there to secure the crown jewels, which are business critical assets of any organization, as it provides a broad approach to manage cyber risk and enable organizations to proactively meet their security and compliance needs. As organizations look towards increasing the adoption of cloud, they should also consider extending the cyber GRC program to address cloud services and gain greater visibility into the exposure to the related cyber risks. So being that said, cloud adoption became pivotal in terms of any digital transformation journey for any organization in the region. So it's important for us to understand that the foundational definitions of cloud and GRC first. So I'll push the discussion. I'll start the discussion by pushing my first question to start with to Sherbal. Sherbal, what is cloud in your opinion? How would you like to define cloud as a technology?
Right. Thanks, Ahmed. So basically, if we go back a bit in history and look at the technology and how it evolved, we all remember basically in the 70s or 80s, the approach was mostly through the mainframe. So basically all organizations had their own major computer for which all business units used to connect and use. Then came the revolution of the PC in the late 80s and 90s, where all the workloads moved from this centralized infrastructure used by one organization into computing based on a personal computer where everyone has his own capacity and computing power located locally, plus the client server model, which would operate within organization. Now, this move from 70s and 60s with the mainframe to the 80s with the PC, major vendors worked on this. We all remember the Microsoft logo and the Microsoft vision toward placing a PC on every desk. Now came the 2000 and mainly the 2010 and onward, a reverse approach happened, which is moving back to a centralized computing infrastructure or location or a data center. And there it was the other way around, moving back from the PC toward the centralized computing power and center. Basically, the cloud currently is what we can call the major computer that is shared by the different entities, the different organizations, the different, in some cases, nations. And it is a shared infrastructure where every organization, every business can connect, use the infrastructure, use the services, use the platform, and we will go through the different models there are. Basically, and then there is the private cloud and the public cloud. In the case of the private cloud, that would concern mostly the governments, which would look into not sharing an infrastructure with different businesses, due to data sensitivity, due to not willing to share data or placing it or hosting it outside the nation. In this case, those kind of private cloud would be managed locally by the government, basically, or for sure outsourced to other vendors. But it will concern the government entities and the different ministries that would use this shared infrastructure for them. The other model is the AWS, Microsoft, Google, and all the vendors. What are they proposing is the public cloud mainly, where all organizations, businesses, banks, you name it, would host part of their infrastructure there, with the possibility of keeping a hybrid model. If they do not will or are not allowed to share some of the information, they can keep it on-prem while sharing the other workloads on the public cloud. So basically, it is this supercomputer that everyone is using it currently. It contains a lot more than what you can create over your on-prem infrastructure, because it's a shared knowledge. It's a shared repository of services that third-party vendors could host and make it available to all other businesses. This is in a nutshell how maybe we can introduce the cloud, the current environment where the cloud is growing. We all remember that it started with AWS basically, in a part where they had those huge investment done in their data centers, but they ended up not maximizing the usage of their infrastructure. So they thought during non-peak times, this infrastructure is sitting there, not being utilized, not being no revenue coming out of it. So why not rent this infrastructure to other businesses that they can take advantage of? And the idea came by, and then other vendors took this initiative and saw the advantages of it and built their own public clouds and made it available to other businesses.
Right. So thank you, Sherbal. I mean, it's a quite an elaborated version of the cloud technology when we have presented, which came out with a very good, strong points for to push this discussion forward. One is the shared computing model to utilize the computing resources to the maximum, and that's could be the potential reason or a driver which becomes, you know, accelerating the cloud adoption more mainly around the globe. But let me just push the second part of the question to Salim, that for any cloud adoption journey, Salim, when we usually talk about technological aspects, as Sherbal rightly highlighted, about the different models of delivery, being a public or private cloud or SaaS or PaaS model, whatever. I think like what could be the GRC around how do you define the GRC around the cloud?
See, when we talk about cloud adoption, as Mr. Sherbal said in detail, that the type of models we have in terms of public cloud and private cloud, in terms of sometimes the governments, sometimes the larger private entities. The key question here is, what is the approach of going to cloud? What would it be that would require you to either you want to have a cloud or no? Would it be a public cloud, private cloud, or you're going to have a hybrid model, as Mr. Sherbal said earlier? However the situation, either it is public, private, or a hybrid model. The key part here is, how do we approach it as a governance? And then when we approach it, we are talking about the risk part of it, and then the compliance part of it. So in approach, we need to understand the first part, where from an enterprise perspective, we need to understand is from the top down, from the top executive management part, what is the company ready to accept as a policy? The directive where the cloud adoption comes, it has to come from the top. So it's as part of the policy, It has to come from the top. Once we are talking about adoption from the top, then it becomes a policy. Then out of that policy, we are talking about the procedures on how it is going to be adopted. And these are the areas, once it is understood that we are going to adopt it, then we are talking about what model are we looking at, and when the solutions are going to cloud, what we need to understand is what is our risk factors, because those risk factors are to be identified, because there is shared models, there's hybrid models. When the data is in shared model, what is your accessibility, what is your identity, what is your availability, what is your accessibility, what is your capacity planning, what is your future proofing that we are talking about. The key part is, why do we need a cloud? As Mr. Sherbal said earlier, again, some companies or some private entities or governments, they deployed earlier very large amounts of compute powers, resources, but they're not using it. So the idea went towards that. So this is where we need to understand the risk part of it. The third part is in the compliance, I would rather say, many times what happens is we configure and forget. We just build something and we just say that let it run. And that is where the major part comes in for the compliance. That there has to be set policies, set rules, and make sure that they're abided by. Like, those rules must be applied. And if they're applied, there has to be a check of whether they're being actually followed, monitored, and accountable for. And that is where we are talking about roles and responsibilities of the team. The RACI, the responsibility matrix, that who is responsible for what. The whole aspect has to be covered in those areas. So collectively, what you need to see, what we need to understand is, the core part is, as a policy or as a requirement, what is the need out of this particular adoption model? It has to be clearly defined. And if going to the cloud, either model of the cloud, public, private, hybrid, I do not wish to say that in that manner or in this manner. Either way, we have to have these components readily available and must be met with. And only then we are talking about a successful GRC model where it can help us adopt these situations.
Absolutely. I mean, we have actually highlighted a very important point, Salim, and quite a lot. I mean, one to start with is that the why we need a cloud. And as Sherbal rightly said, like, when you know that, I mean, the adopting a shared computing model is more cost effective and more, towards like what do you call the as an outcome of a more effective capacity planning. On the other side, how we can enable the cloud adoption in an effective way in an organization, of course, as you rightly said, comes from the top, which is the management buy-in. And without management buy-in, we cannot drive any enterprise level initiative in an effective and efficient manner. But on the other side, and of course, when we have to look into the all, the risk aspects, that what are the key risks we will be facing and how we will be able to mitigate. So as part of the GRC, as you rightly said, the core process of the GRC around the cloud is to assess our risks for this cloud adoption journey. So getting with that thing, and of course we need to get into the more deeper discussion on the how we can identify these risks, what are those risks, and how we can effectively mitigate that. But there are some other processes which I need to touch upon, which could be the performance management, the resource management, and more particularly the ownership and accountability. So we will touch upon these points one by one. So let's start with the risk management. So Sherbal, what do you think, like, what would be the more effective approach in assessing the risks before we go to start the journey for cloud migration, or how we, and what is the right time and how we should do that?
Right, Ahmed. So basically, every organization exploring the idea of moving to the cloud needs to understand what is available out there and what are the risks associated with each model. So basically, the three models that are more or less available over the cloud are the, as we know, the IaaS model, the PaaS model, and the SaaS model. And for each one of those models, there are risks associated and responsibilities. Who is taking this responsibility over his shoulders? The risks mainly are around the data, the hosting, where is it hosted, what are the access, who have access to this data. And in the particular case of public sector entities, since we do a lot of business with public sector entities, the data hosted and the data that is shared over this cloud is a concern for those kind of entities. I think if we have in the audience some people that are in the public sector, they would understand this very well. So basically, in some cases, for example, let me give the example of what Microsoft tried to do in Germany. In Germany, we have one of the highest standards of data protection. And since Microsoft is a US-based company and they are subject to US laws, they had to do this kind of special agreement with Deutsche Telekom to build the Asia region in Germany under Deutsche Telekom flag, so that the data hosted there would be subject to German laws, so that in a way to initiate and support and help German entities host their data there. So basically the risks are around data ownership, who have access to it, the kind of mechanisms and protocols that they need to create to make sure that the data is safe. And then the journey would start from the governance to the risk management to the compliance. In the governance part, there are the different laws, the different standards depending on the industry, because there are some industries that they are highly standardized and they have their own standards. For example, I would mention the health industry, some other industries related to the finance have highly standardized protocols that they need to follow. And in order to follow those, they need at the end of it to manage all the risk associated and make sure that they are following it throughout the journey, from the design of the solution, from migrating it, from making it operational. So all these kind of risks around the assets, the controls, the implementation of the controls. These kind of risks needs to be well studied by the entity planning to move to the cloud and see if the benefits are greater than the risks, then the migration could be something to be done and be considered. If the risks are higher, then in this case, keeping a hybrid model or even an on-prem model might be the best case for these kind of businesses. Plus, what are we considering to move? Is it legacy applications? Is that services that do not need customization? In this case, risks are minimal because the kind of service that is offered through this kind of SaaS model is more or less common to all businesses. And in this case, risks are minimal. If we're talking about some legacy or customized application, in this case, we need to have a PaaS probably model where our developers can go there, migrate and reconstruct, re-architecture the solution to fit the cloud model, move quickly from development to operation with DevOps kind of development environment. So these are more or less the risks that should be considered based on the business model, based on the data sovereignty and the like.
Absolutely, that's exactly like, from a risk associated to the migration, that's of course been result in the right selection of the hybrid model or a delivery model, which is more towards SaaS based or PaaS or IaaS based. So Salim, would you like to add anything on this, what has been said here?
I would like to add one example to what Mr. Sharbel said. particularly regarding the governance part or the compliance part, I would rather say, with subject to local laws. One of the examples from my own experience in Kuwait, we were working on a strategic project naming the airport project. And we wanted to implement an information management system for the whole project. And we wanted all the stakeholders to digitize all of the process so that reporting mechanism, project monitoring, and everything should happen dynamically across all the stakeholders. So when we talk about stakeholders, the government is a stakeholder, international consultants are the stakeholders, global consultants are stakeholders, global contractors are stakeholders, and there are thousands of subcontractors who are stakeholders. So in such a situation, when we talk about reporting models, which are across different boundaries, it's really difficult in terms of how are we going to comply with certain regulatory frameworks. There is no clearly defined regulatory framework out there which encompasses all of these areas. So in these situations, what happened was the solution was coming from Australia. The idea of the solution provider was we will host the solution in Australia. At that time in Kuwait, there was no specific law which would enforce a rule which says that, you know, whatever the projects we have in Kuwait should be subject to Kuwait law, just like Mr. Sherbal said, what happened in Germany with Microsoft with that special project. So we being part of the consultancy team, we had to convince the government to introduce a law and allow this company to bring the solution from Australia to Kuwait, host the solution in Kuwait, so that the whole project should be subject to Kuwait laws. So the only option that was allowed at that time was if the solution is hosted within GCC region. So as a whole, GCC as a unit, the court of law is implementable across the GCC region. So from that perspective, this solution was implemented. So which then successfully ran, and the project got delivered right on time. So what I'm trying to say here is essentially these are the areas, you know, right now, if you look at one more example, Microsoft, Amazon, all are they expanding to Gulf. Why are they expanding to Gulf if they had data centers and everywhere in Europe, in North America, in South America, Far East, everywhere? But after the introduction of these local rules, the governments introduced these new laws. So they have to localize. They are bringing data center near to the customer. So within that vicinity. So right now, the latencies, we are talking about sub-millisecond latencies. But if a data center is in US and I want to access it from Gulf, we are talking about a latency of 80 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, sometimes 300, 400, depending on the data congestion or the network congestion. But in the cloud era of the services that we are consuming today, is that an acceptable latency? So we are talking about the business requirement. So what the business requires now, from the business requirement perspective, these organizations, for them, latency is a big loss.
Indeed. So, but I'll just, you actually highlighted a very important point, which is because when we consider the latency requirements, when we touch upon one of the very important key driver for cloud adoption, which apart from the cost-effective model or scalability, it becomes a resiliency as well. Cloud is a solution for resiliency problems as well. So where we are talking about RTOs and RPOs, and then of course we discuss about the latencies and the response, you know, how efficient our communication it is, in addition to being mobile, in addition to being scalable and more robust. So our delivery model, of course, becomes more robust, but we have to govern it in a more proper way. Otherwise, governing processes, if we don't define the roles and responsibilities and accountabilities appropriately, it again, end of the day, gonna be a challenge to manage that technology. So Sherbal, from TCO perspective, what do you think? I know because the one, it is a big challenge for CTOs to manage the cost of a cloud in any organization. So who primarily should own that cloud investment in any organization? Because cloud is basically a shared computing model. So the cost will be shared among different internal stakeholders in the organization. So what's your take on this thing from a cost ownership point of view?
Right, Ahmed. So basically, in this context, we all know that moving to the cloud or building a private cloud is more or less a huge investment for any organization that is planning to do. So in this regard, there's different stakeholders here. There's this technology part, there is the CFO part, if I may say, the investment part, and there are different, the operation, the business unit owners part, which all should have this discussion internally around, are we planning to go? What are the incentives? What are the risks? And each have to give his own perspective review of the topic. From the financial side, it's all about a comparative study between a CAPEX and an OPEX model. Whether we go and invest and build our own data center and build our own infrastructure and do this investment ahead, capitalizing on this investment over the future, over the 5 or the 10 coming years, or do we go with the model where we invest small amounts every year on subscription with public cloud, with SaaS offerings, and then we take the advantage of the availability, scalability of the cloud. So it's a matter from the financial side of the model that we prefer. From the technology side, it's more around the availability of the services. The CTO would from his side consider with his teams what is the kind of technologies and application we are using currently, how much they are cyclical in the way they are used. Is it that we need them all the time up and running with maximum capacity, or is it that we need them for a small amount of time with burst kind of usage for the computing and the memory? If it is more of a model that is bursty, let's call it, then in this case, cloud would make sense because it would allow going over, increasing the capacity just to answer the needs of the users over a short period of times, instead of investing the whole amount of money in building a data center that could answer those needs. We could go with the cloud that would offer the scalability over a short period of times without paying the whole amount of building the data center. So there is different perspective around going to the cloud from the different stakeholders, the technology part, the finance part, the investment, and how we see ourselves positioning ourselves in the market. Are we a company that is forward-looking, embracing the digital transformation, or are we more of a conservative kind of organization? Are we more of a public sector organization that we need to make sure that our data is governed, protected within our premises? It's more of, it could be part of how we are philosophically trying to position ourselves in the market. Some companies are what we call born in the cloud. Those came by after the 2010. Those have always embraced, since inception, they embraced the digital transformation and the cloud approach. For them, moving to the on-prem is the transformation. So basically, they've been born in the cloud. That's where they feel they are better and productive, the most productive. For them, the transformation is something different. Instead of the old corporations that have been always built around local data centers, infrastructure that is built in-house, the transformation might cause different and have other questions here. We can talk a lot around also the application. These are legacy applications that need to be adjusted to the cloud environment to make them more of a microservices instead of modular kind of application that would that is all a bit legacy kind of systems. The microservices is more advanced and more agile in the way it operates. So there's an effort here also required. So with the effort of transforming this kind of application that justify the move to the cloud or not? are these kind of applications that we need to keep them on-prem and then move the other kind of services, the SaaS that is available outside. So it's just a question of what to do, a pros and cons discussion within any organization.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, see, from a governance, an effective governance point of view, I mean, there is always a need to assign a single point of ownership, because there will be a shared computing resources, the number of applications, data will be owned by different stakeholders. So that it's not an easy answer, and that varies industry to industry, geography to geography. But what, in the light of what Salim was saying, like, you know, that when every geography have the local legislations and local regulatory requirements. So in that context, and I'll just move on the discussion towards the other processes of governance concerning the shortage of time. Salim, in your opinion, what do you think that, what would be the challenge in cloud adoption journey to have, like, you know, from a resource management perspective and the performance monitoring? How do you see, like, what are the, from your experience, the key challenges could be, and what would be the solutions?
Apologies for that. I would like to approach this question from a little bit different aspect. Yes, we will talk about resources. Yes, we will talk about performance. But first of all, if we go back in time, I would like to call upon the discussions of Mr. Sharbal, how the computing world has evolved over time. We had centralized computing, and then we became decentralized, and then came in a centralized computing model, and then it's going to go back in a decentralized model. We generally call this as a TikTok kind of a model, where it goes in cycle always. So today we are talking about the centralization of the computer or the technological resources. And later on, if you see now, machine learning used to be now it is currently, it's a centralized platform in many areas. But when you look at the Apple devices, for example, not particularly in favor of these things, but still I would say that machine learning power that Apple has introduced on its devices, it's amazing. They have suddenly started the motion towards what used to be a centralized computing model towards a decentralized computing model. If you look at companies like of Tesla's, where the autonomous driving of a vehicle, this generally is considered to be a supercomputing algorithm. It was considered to be, but today they have a complete supercomputer sitting on every single vehicle being rolled out. Okay, now these autonomous vehicles are out there. Now we are talking about a world which is going towards Internet of Things, IoT, connected devices, autonomous driving, smart cities. While looking at these kind of concepts, at one side, we are part of those solutions as who we are in terms of we as an enterprises. If we are an enterprise, and if you're running an enterprise, you may have security solutions, which in terms of a smart city concept, you may have to connect it with the government. Okay. Similarly, you are driving your vehicle, which for vehicle telematics, you would be connected to a solution provider. So it's again a connected platform for IoT. But this all, if we see in a holistic picture, is a huge infrastructure at the back end. Okay, so now when we look at the very large enterprise level, resource is the key. Now, when we say resource, there are two ways to look at it. One is a resource that you can get on board for the time being, or is it a second part of it is as an operational resource. What I mean to say by these two types of resources is, let's say for technological enablement, if you want to build a new solution, you might need some resources for the time being. But if you want to run the operations of that particular technological solution, you need an operational team. Okay, this is where the resource management is going to be one of the core cost factors for any kind of the solution. Either it is a small organization or a very large organization. If it's a small organization and they want to build let's say a simple communication platform. Do I have to build a communication platform? Do I have to spend millions of dollars building a reliable communications platform today? No, I don't have to, because I can subscribe to maybe $10 a month, a very reliable communication platform for say about 30 or 40 or 50 people company. Hardly it's going to cost me a few $1,000s over a year.
Yeah, but
So
Salim, just if you kindly, like, sorry to interrupt, but if you kindly like shed a light on the implications of the resource perspective in terms of SaaS, PaaS, and EAS.
this
Because
is what
for
I'm
each
coming
model,
towards. This is what I'm coming
yeah,
towards. This is what I'm coming
yeah.
towards. So when we talk about these small companies, if I have to build them, the resource planning is a major problem, right? So similarly, so you need to see this resource is going towards the cost factors. Resource is a cost. I would like to look at resource as a cost, not as a manpower only, because if you pay for that manpower, it's just a resource as a cost. Okay, so for me, resources is nothing, just not a human power, it's just a cost factor that you need to consider for the technological enablement of your business. Okay, and the second part of the question, I want to say performance. As I said before as well, many times in cloud enabled solutions, I would like to say IT administrators or IT managers, they just configure and forget. Assuming like, everything is included. We say that in analytics or in when, let's say any solution, let's not name any solution, we assume that, it is working. So we do not generally tend to monitor. And this is where comes the part of governance. Now, at a governance level, do we have KPIs defined to make sure that these tasks are performed? Are these KPIs very well defined? Are these KPIs being part of the roles and responsibilities of the team? These are the factors that has to be there to have a successful GRC setup in any organization. So performance, if you don't monitor the performance of your, not only the performance, it's not about only about performance, it's about monitoring the general parameters. For example, how do you know that you have reached your capacity limits? You have to monitor. How you have to predict that, after 3 months, I may have to expand the subscription that I have got on a given cloud. And now, since the budget was only for an X amount of compute resource that we had, or a storage resource, or any network resource that we had it planned. If I haven't got monitoring done, and if I don't have that, I cannot plan it for future. And this is the flexibility of the cloud that gives us, like, capacity planning on the fly, scalability on the fly, monitoring on the fly. But we need to add these tools in our policies and procedures and make sure that the accountability is given to the team. And for that accountability, a KPI is set so that an audit team or a compliance team should review whether these whole processes are being followed.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly the performance monitoring mechanisms, which from a governance point of view, internal audits and the compliance reviews plays an important role in order to ensure the performance and the strategic alignment towards the objectives and the direction of the digital transformation journey. So since we are heading towards the last few minutes of the session, I just would like to wrap up the discussion what we started, and then we can have the final takeaways from the guests and then directly jump on the Q&A session. So just to start with, then first of the key points what we have discussed is, like, from the ownership and the roles and responsibilities point of view, the management buy-in for any cloud adoption is most important, because that's exactly plays a role of a governing body who will basically drive and the direct and evaluate the performance of the adoption. On the other side, when we discussed about the regulatory requirements, including the risk management approach, so I would say it's a more risk-aware approach of cloud adoption, knowing that why we are moving to the cloud, answering all those challenges which comes on the way, considering the data privacy, considering the performance, considering the latency challenges, and so on. On the other side, we discussed about the financial aspect of it, because that's one of the key driver of any initiative apart from the cloud, in addition to the cloud adoption, because one of the key drivers for cloud adoption is, of course, the financial side. The other side is the resilience and scalability and robustness. That gives us the mobility to work, because most of the organizations post the pandemic have moved completely on the cloud. They have, they started working from remotely without any physical, having a physical premises available. And that's exactly is resulted in a lot of transformation. And towards the end, we have discussed about more effective approaches on how we can manage the resources and monitor the performance. So I hope the panelists have got a lot of useful, insightful knowledge today. So before we jump to the Q&A session, I would like to request my respected panelists to give the final takeaways for the audience. Let's start with Sherbal. If you like, what would be your recommendations to the cloud and GRC professionals to take away from today's discussion?
Right, thanks, Ahmed. So basically, a key takeaway is there's no one solution that fits all needs. I would say every organization has to measure the pros and cons of the cloud versus on-prem versus a hybrid model. They need to go over the applications they are using, the kind of services they need, and based on that, understand what are the advantages of adopting this cloud service provider or building their own private cloud or remaining on-prem. It is a study that should be made internally around what kind of data also can go over the cloud and what kind of data should not go over the cloud. The services that can be made available and easily scalable over the cloud versus services or applications that are legacy, and moving them to the cloud might necessitate a big effort, so in a big associated cost. So it all depends on the type of business, plus of course the regulations and the laws that are in effect in the country or the industry that they are in. So all these kind of parameters should be taken into consideration toward having a cloud strategy.
Thank you, Sherbal. So a slight the understanding. So I'll pass it to Peter to wrap up the session and heading towards a quick Q&A. So far, we haven't received any question from the audience, but Peter will take from this point onward, and then we'll take the Salim's final takeaway message as well. Peter, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Ahmed, and thank you all to the panelists as well, Sherbal and Salim. Thank you very much for the engaging and very topical events and interesting conversation that you were covering through the session there. So yeah, again, just want to thank our guests. Hopefully today's session was of perked your interest today. We would like you to engage with our community as well, and obviously you to be part of it further with things like updates and future events, and maybe even contributing to ideas for future topics as well that we can discuss on these events. So don't forget you can join the LinkedIn group that we have, and we advertised as well. Also, if you're interested in sessions like this, we also have Privacy Connect events as well. So this is obviously a GRC event, but we also have Privacy Connect events. They're over, I think it's over 120 different cities that we cover globally now, and that's at privacyconnect.com. So you can connect with some of the privacy associates and experts that we have globally as well on these events. and also at onetrust.com, which is obviously our main website. So privacyconnect.com for the privacy events and GRC Connect for this particular event. Just wanted to sort of wrap up now today and just say to thanks everyone for joining, and yourselves as well for attending today. Hopefully again it was an informative session, and for those who attended, we look forward to meeting you or hearing from you for future events as well. So that's it from me, unless there's any other questions that came through on the chat. Was there any other questions that came through?
Yeah, there is one question. May I suggest, like, before we head to the question, when the final takeaway message from Salim was remaining. So let's take his final takeaway, and then we will head towards the question.
I would like to say a few words in terms of the convergence of GRC that is happening all around. My recommendations would be, the first thing would be to streamline your processes, whatever they are. Make sure that your processes are streamlined for increasing your assurance and reliability of your infrastructure, whether it's in cloud, public, private, hybrid, however is the model. Increase information quantity and quality. You must understand what is the quantity of information and what is the quality of information. That has to be there, because data is the oil of the new world. Decrease your operational costs. Manage your costs. You have to see, do you have anything what you don't need? Because we are talking about regular costs. Next is, look at these processes on how they are contributing to your business performance. Whatever you are doing, whatever is your infrastructure, what is the relation of that infrastructure to the business performance? Because that is where the KPI is being delivered. And the business management would like to see that relation and see that KPI, that I have this and it has delivered this in business for me. That relationship has to be built. Establish and maintain security. It's a must. Lastly, but not the least, don't configure and forget. Just don't do that. Otherwise, you will be waiting for surprises. One more thing I forgot was, maybe you'll have to, first thing is, for the data governance terms, classify your data. Classify and structure your data, and then you will have everything going onwards. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. And thank you, Mr. Peter.
Thank you very much. Now, Peter, and now shall I take this one, because there's a question from the audience. So I'll throw this question to anyone, any of the panelists to answer. I mean, the question is like, for someone who is adamant and considering on-prem solution in terms of security and latency, what would be the convincing answer to consider cloud technology, regardless of the financial impact? So anyone would like to take up?
I can try to answer, maybe in part. See, there is no given rule that everything has to go cloud. There is no such a rule which you need to convince your management to adopt. That is the first thing you need to understand. The second thing is, if there is a business validation that if this project, product, solution, if it goes to cloud, you have to show to the business management that what are pros and cons of doing it and what are the risks of not doing it. If you clearly demonstrate to the business management, I don't think that there is any business management who would refuse to accept all these factors. The only part you have to understand is demonstrate why and what exactly are you going to do? What are the factors? If you don't do, what are the costs? What are the risks the business is ready to accept? Remember, the risks are accepted by the business, not by a person. So you have to pass on this information to the business. If they agree with the risks, it is the risk accepted by the business as per the policy.
Right. So thank you. So since we are already done with the time, so but there's one last question which I'll take, and I'll request Sherbal to respond very briefly, please. What is the responsibility of CSP in maintaining and implementing GRC?
Yeah. So basically, in this regard, it depends on the model. If we're talking about the IaaS, the PaaS, or the SaaS, and probably this is a major point we didn't address during the session. So in this regard, it depends on what kind of a IaaS model. In this regard, the customer or the service consumer would have the responsibility, the whole part that is related to the platform and the application, while the cloud service provider would be mainly in charge of the infrastructure. The further you go up in the model, if you go to the PaaS and then the SaaS, more responsibility would go towards the service provider and less on the consumer. So with the SaaS model, most of the GRC responsibility would go more into this provider and less into the consumer, like logical, because the infrastructure, the platform, and even up to the application is covered by the service provider. Hopefully, any short answer we try to what the audience is looking for.
Perfectly elaborated. Thank you so very much. Peter, over to you, because we are almost done with the time.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, just wanted to wrap up and say thanks once again, Ahmed. A pleasure as always, and to our panelists again for your support and topical conversation as well. We look forward to seeing the community again on the next event, and thank you again for your participation, your questions, and your time today. And we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you all.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day, all of you.
Take care. Bye-bye.